Hello, everyone. My name is Christian Reyes, and I am Senior Associate of Student Engagement. And I'm so excited to be able to moderate today's webinar. We have a panel of amazing folks here who will be talking more about the state of today's basic needs. What are some practices, what are some policies that really impact the state of basic needs today, and how we can continue to impact the field of basic needs to ensure that we're providing holistic support for all of our students. And I'll go ahead and start off with just some panelist introductions. So I'll pass it over to Bryce to introduce himself, and then he can popcorn it off to the next panelist.
Hi, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on which coast you are in. I'm Bryce McKibben, the Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Hope Center for Student Basic Needs. I'm actually based in the Seattle area myself, and the larger Puget Sound region, after having spent a couple of years a long time actually in DC. I lead the team at the Hope Center that focuses mostly on federal policy issues, and glad to be with you here today.
Awesome. Jamie, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks, TSC, for having me and all of us here today. My name is Jaime Hansen, pronouns she, her, they, and ella. I am the Executive Director of Swipe Out Hunger. So we're a national organization working to end hunger on college campuses. And we have about 900 partners across North America that we get to support. Very excited to have this conversation, especially as we were just discussing the panelists on the heels of Chebna and Ensign last week. So really excited to be here and looking forward to this discussion. I'll popcorn it over to Paige.
Hey everyone, I'm Paige and I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Student Basic Needs Coalition. I'm based in Ann Arbor, but we're a national organization working with thousands of students across over 100 campuses to really make sure that all eligible college students are identified and enrolled in the public benefits that are available to them. And I'll pass it to Maritza.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maritza Perez. My pronouns are she, her, and ella, and I am the Basic Needs Coordinator at Poly SLO. I'm located in San Luis Obispo. I'm really excited to be here and talk a little bit more about basic needs at the varying levels of influence that we all, practice in. And I can park it over to Jyanne.
Hi everyone, my name is Jyanne Guide. I'm a junior at North Carolina A&T State University, as well as a student ambassador fellow with Today's Students Coalition, and I volunteer at my school's food pantry, the Aggie Source. And I'm happy to be here with you all today to talk a little bit more about basic needs.
Awesome. Thank you all for your introductions. You all briefly mentioned like your roles, the organizations that you're with, but I guess that leads us perfectly to our very first question. So our very first question for you all is, what work is your organization doing to expand basic needs access for today's learners? And we can go ahead and start off with Jamie.
Oh, everyone loves to be first. Bryce took the first one. Oh, goodness. Well, Swipe Out Hunger believes in a mission that is multi-tiered. So if you're like me and you like to listen to webinars and click around, check out our website, swipehunger.org, so you can just follow along while I chat. So we have three major prongs, and what we simplify it to is ending hunger today, ending hunger tomorrow, and ending hunger forever. In the today category, we have free programmatic support. This is our partner network that I just mentioned. And this is where we can help folks either establish or evolve their on-campus anti-hunger programming. We have meal swipe drive toolkits, pantry toolkits. We have support for establishing a basic needs center. We have monthly swipe sessions. We have a swipe grant every year. So that's where we recognize that students are experiencing hunger right now, and it can really mean the difference between them staying enrolled if they have access to food. Tomorrow's strategy is more along the lines of how do we create some changes within the existing system to provide more medium and longer term sustainability of programs. This could look like our hunger-free campus legislation, state agency collaboration. How do we start altering so that campuses have the supports they need next year or the next several years to have those programs be successful? But ultimately, like every nonprofit and every organization here on this call, we want to put ourselves out of business. So swaying the hearts and minds of decision makers is our long-term strategy and how we might be able to end hunger forever. We believe that administrators, legislators, the folks who are in the seat of authority and again, decision making, don't necessarily always understand the realities of who college students are today and what that reality looks like. We want to make sure that we're sharing stories, amplifying student voices, helping them better understand who the modern learner is today. It's very different than it was 20 years ago. And of course, potentially in a future administration, our forever strategies will be expanded to more broad systemic solutions at the federal level. But right now, we recognize that there's just a large gap in understanding who people are today. So overall, we want to activate and compensate students to make those changes. So our strategies in each one of those pillars involve student engagement, and they're at the center of our work. And we recognize it's going to take all of us. So that movement building capacity, that coalition building capacity is really important in every single strategy. So that's just a little bit about SWIPE. Christian, do you want me to pass it to somebody else or you want to take the lead?
Go.
I love it. Jyanne, I'd love to hear what you're doing in your pantry and a little bit more about how you get involved.
Yeah, thank you for passing it. And I just want to say first a shout out and thank you to Swipe Out Hunger because the Aggie Source Food Pantry has actually been supported by Swipe Out Hunger various times. And so what we do at the food pantry at North Carolina A&T, for a little bit of context, North Carolina A&T is the largest public HBCU in the nation. And so we're based in Greensboro, North Carolina, and we're actually in a food desert. And so I became aware of my school's food pantry, the Aggie Source, when I was a freshman on campus. Now I'm a junior. And, I couldn't make it to the store because I didn't have a car or anything like that. And I was like, huh, like let me utilize my campus resources. And I think my university does a great job with like, promoting all of our campus resources. And so I was really shocked, like at my first time being a student shopper at the pantry, like it was literally set up like a grocery store. Not only do we provide food for students, but we have a fresh produce room. We give away hygiene products and toiletries and things like that. And we also actually have a professional clothing rack where we get donations from those within the community, but also like department stores as well. And so, how it works is any student, graduate or undergraduate student, can come in and they can shop for free twice a month. All that they have to do is show their student identification card and like fill out a form just so that we can keep a, track record of like foot traffic and things of that nature. But we just shop them. One thing I really like about the space is that it's student led. And our coordinator of the source, Miss Sherelle, she does a lot of work in terms of like the programming that we do. And that's actually how I kind of got intertwined with the work going on at Swipe Out Hunger. A lot of the funding that we get for the pantry itself to provide food for students is from the school, but especially in today's times, we are being sold out super quickly. I mean, this past semester, like I've been volunteering at the source for about a year and a half. We would used to stay stocked for many days. Now we restock one day and we are gone the next day. I literally went shopping the other day and then we're already out. So we really do rely on the donations of those within the community, but with grants from Swipe Out Hunger and things like that. And so I think it's a really great resources for students to use. We always try to think about programming and things and partnerships that we can make to make, not only a shopping experience, but another experience. We actually just had a partnership last week when it was a little bit nicer here in North Carolina, where a mobile food pantry actually came and it was a big truck. And in addition to students being able to come and shop in our space, they were giving away really big bags of just, food items. And again, like that's what we're there for. And so in addition to that, actually, we sometimes have a SNAP representative come in on days where we're doing programming and students, like after they do their shop or whether they're going for clothes or hygiene products or what have you, they can actually meet with the SNAP representative who can kind of walk them through like applying for SNAP and assistance in that way. So we do a lot. I'm very passionate about the space. And as we're growing on campus, we're always looking to expand our initiatives to help students, get those basic needs.
Also, Maritza, would you like to go?
Yeah, so I can kind of briefly touch on the different support systems that we provide for students. So we do one of the biggest supports and one of the is our food pantry. So we have a robust inventory of fresh produce that's supplied by our local food bank. We also coordinate daily food rescues with our stores. And we coordinate with campus partners too, like our crops unit and campus dining to rescue both like fresh produce, a bunch of other variety of different stuff that they have provided for us. And like Jyanne was saying, we've also seen a dramatic increase in our usage. This fall quarter, we saw a 25% increase in students, almost an average of about 3,700 students a week. And for a little bit of context, our food pantry is about 100 by 100 square feet, so it's small but mighty. So that's a little bit of the resources that we've had. We've continued to build on that partnership with different stores on campus to be able to meet that need. And partnerships are kind of an essential point to basic needs efforts on our campus. Just for a little bit of context of our landscape, a lot of the basic needs services at Cal Poly SLO are provided in different departments. So housing is indeed a student, which is in a different department. Health insurance navigation, different department. Our CalFresh outreach team is spearheaded by a faculty department head. So all these different moving pieces. And so one of the biggest puzzle pieces around campus is getting all these folks together in the same room, chatting with each other, streamlining referral systems, building like shared assets, material assets to share out to students. So that's one thing that we've really been trying to spearhead more, is that partnership with those partners, and also with student government. We've actually recently partnered with our ASI student government to launch a grocery shuttle on campus, taking students to the grocery store twice a week, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. to local grocery stores, all for free. Just need to show your student identification. And so these kind of two, like both the food pantry and the student government sort of partnership, really illustrate like how transformative it is to bring other people into the circle, into decision making, into like planning and strategic planning. So that's something that we have been working on and will continue to do as we hope to reach more people too, like whether that's working with athletes, fraternity and sorority life, just making sure that we're expanding our reach as much as we can by leveraging these partnerships. And I can pawn it off to Bryce.
Thanks, Maritza. I want to just tell you a little bit about the Hope Center real quickly. We like to say that we have three main lines of work: policy, practice, and research. And what that really means is we're documenting the problem in our student basic needs survey. We're researching what works to help meet those student needs, and then we're trying to do something about it, really in a systemic way, and particularly at the policy level where we see the most opportunities. This is a whole of ecosystem approach, right? We have campuses working, we have students working to change the culture on their individual, at their institutions, and then we have to call on policymakers to take action. I lead the policy team, so the things that are most near and dear to my heart are talking about federal policy action and state policy, and where we can add additional investments to address the really wide-ranging needs that students face, from food to housing, childcare, transportation. But all of these things work in concert, and that's what the Hope Center is mostly focused on. We're getting ready to roll out our 2026 federal policy priorities, which right now will focus on some of the major threats on the horizon, which we can get into later in the webinar. Things like threats to the Pell Grant and its ongoing funding, and recent cuts made under the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act that will have a damaging impact on states' ability to fund higher education and fund the support programs that students rely on. So those are the things that are going to be very near term in our focus. But I also wanted to emphasize too that there are many organizations are doing the work at the institution level in concert with us, and one of the great privileges we have is to also be a member of the National Coalition for College Student Essential Needs. I'm help co-convene that group. We increasingly think of it as one of the core lines of work that we feel is super valuable and essential for the work, for our collective efforts. And obviously today's Students Coalition is an amazing partner in that effort as well. So I just wanted to mention too, even though that's sort of outside the scope of exactly what the Hope Center does, it is a sort of a convener role that we really appreciated. And I'm glad that we have some folks from the coalition on this call today.
Awesome. And I will hand it off over to Paige to talk a little bit more about the work that your org is doing.
Great. So I know I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the Student Basic Needs Coalition has become really focused on making sure that all eligible college students are enrolled in public benefits and all students who need resources are eligible for some of those resources. And we believe that when these students are actually enrolled in the resources available to them, finances will stop being a barrier to college success. And so that's kind of like the thesis that we're operating on right now. I actually started this organization as a college student myself. I was working 30 hours a week in school and still could barely make ends meet. And one of my jobs that I had was actually working as a research assistant studying food and housing insecurity on campus. So as I was doing interviews with these students, who were experiencing these issues, I was able to connect my experiences and their experiences to really see that this is a really big systems issue. And through that work, I realized there were two main barriers. So one, students didn't know what resources were available to them. And two, the campuses either didn't know how to connect students to those resources or just didn't have the capacity to do so. And so we really started to address those issues. And now we partner with students, colleges, and states to solve those two problems through three main methods. So right now we're training and supporting student leaders in doing outreach and enrollment assistance for SNAP and Medicaid through our Peer Navigator program. We also help colleges and state agencies proactively find and connect eligible students to SNAP and Medicaid through our AI-enabled technology platform. And we also share research and practical strategies that are strengthening coordination between higher education institutions, public benefit systems, and students. And through all of that, we really believe that integrating the student perspective is essential to making that long-term difference. So I think, that kind of has a through line with a lot of the other things that people were saying is that authentic student leadership is really essential to making the difference between, resources that exist and resources that actually get used.
Awesome. Thank you all. You all talked about the amazing work that your organization is doing, but in that we're also running into a lot of roadblocks. And you're all working directly in enabling access and basic needs for these students. So I'm curious to know, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see related to basic needs for today's learners? And I will go ahead and drop that question in the group, in the chat. And Jyanne, if you would like to kick us off with that question, feel free to take it away.
Yeah, thank you for that. I can definitely speak from a more like student perspective. I think it's just general like knowledge and understanding about resources that are available to help students gain access to basic needs. I see it in my food pantry, I see it in my friend group, I see it just anywhere on campus. I think that a lot of students just are not aware. And I think, especially thinking from, a university standpoint and like what can be done to like make those students aware. As Maritza mentioned, like, partnerships with SGA, like making sure that you're getting students involved. And like, I think that exposure all around from student groups definitely needs to be something that's amplified because these are where students are at, right? And so, in addition to that, of course, I'm going to bring up like social media. I think, these organizations, these groups, student government, and things like that nature, like, why are we not putting out infographics? Like, my student food pantry, like, we love our Instagram. We're always posting on there. When our mobile food pantry comes, we post like, and it's also the messaging too. It's like, free fruits, like, come stop by, right? Like, do you want to learn more about like how you can get these resources? We're putting that out there. And I think that's so important, right? Because, you know, as college students, we have a lot to deal with already. So I think what is should be the priority in terms of making sure that students are aware of these resources is like meeting them where they're at. And again, I think that comes with messaging. I also think that comes with programming as well. Like, I'll be real with you. As a college student, afterwards in classes all day, somebody might not want to sit in like, a long session, regarding like, okay, this is breaking down the resource. And although they should, right, we have to think about, okay, how are we going to increase the student engagement? And that's why, again, I think that campus programming is so important. And so, yeah, I would just say the learning curve regarding like resources is a really huge challenge. But I think if we utilize programming on campuses as well as social media use to make sure that we're just amplifying those resources and like making sure our messaging reaches them, then we can overcome those challenges. And I will pass it to Jamie.
I'm over here like plus one, plus one, plus one. Uh, Jyanne, you touched on something that I have to like double down on for folks here is that messaging piece. A lot of folks love to talk about stigma, and I'm so bored with it. I'm so bored. Like, stigma, it's really natural for people to ask for help, right? We go around our daily lives asking for help all the live long day. And there's something even extra about a college campus where, like, you have a community where people ask each other for help. Like, how do I get to this building? How do I navigate financial aid? Like, people are exchanging that information on a regular, right? Stigma comes from the judgment you experience when you ask for help. And what you just outlined, Jyanne, like, brilliant, excellent, right? Like, when people come into the pantry, once people learn about those resources, how are they made to feel about asking for that help? So just like bravissimo. Sorry. Thank you. There's plenty of other challenges. Bryce is going to get into HR1. I'm not even going to steal that thunder because, Lord of mercy, the current administration is really putting the screws down on food access and higher education right now. There's 2 points of challenge that we're trying to keep up with. One, Maritza and Jyanne, you've already outlined. Across the nation, people are saying increased need. They're reporting between 30 and 50% increased access on their campus anti-hunger program, meal swipe drives, pantries, basic needs centers, all of the above. How do we keep up with that need to help people stay enrolled is a major challenge because we've got corporations who have additional tariffs now. They're donating less in kind. We've got higher prices at the grocery store. Everything is in competition, creating this perfect storm for how do I get more food on campus in the hands of students. And I am going to touch on HR1. I'm sorry, Bryce. The current administration is making public resources like SNAP, WIC, TANF just really more difficult to access. Views on immigration are creating additional burdens for international students. Like I said, higher education overall is under attack. Higher education was already really hard. Navigating new systems, working really hard on your academic goals, more likely working in addition to going to school. 80% of students are working in addition to going to school now. All of that means your life is very full. It's very difficult, and you're still working on attaining your academic goals. But now we've got these additional like pressure on the system, and it's making it near impossible to navigate and to successfully complete your higher education. So the environment, the culture, the logistics of increased need, both of them are just I'm trying not to elaborate too much and be like Debbie Downer and like the sky is falling, but it really is kind of perfect storm. It's just, I'm going to go back to that. Bryce, tell us more about your challenges. Would they have anything to do with federal government?
Perfect segue. Thanks, Jamie. I'm happy to pick that one up. It absolutely does have to do with the federal government. I think we have to acknowledge that federal policy has just completely failed us and has directly contributed to the crisis we're seeing on our campuses. Right. I mean, if we had a sufficient financial aid system, if we had a relationship between the federal government and the state government, where the federal government encouraged colleges or encouraged states to adequately fund higher education, a state-federal partnership that exists in many other areas of spending. If we had widespread recognition that federal financial aid just right now is simply insufficient to cover the actual total cost of attendance for students, we would have a different landscape. We also now have situations where policymakers are making other cuts through an austerity lens. Is a situation where they think we can simply cut our way, cut down funding it for social programs and things like SNAP and Medicaid in order to reduce folks' need for them or reliance on them, that is having widespread collateral damage on students themselves, even though the actual policies themselves weren't necessarily targeted at students. So things like the cuts to SNAP and Medicaid rolling downhill to state budgets. It's going to be a really hard time over the next couple of years. So when I think about the biggest challenges that are facing student basic needs security, it really is, and from my lens, the federal policy environment and needing a whole sea change in the way people are thinking about meeting student basic needs and college affordability. And I can't lay the blame just at the feet of the administration, which has certainly taken steps that have been really damaging, but also Congress. The current majority in Congress has, passed on a very narrow with very narrow vote, the One Big Beautiful Bill. And it is now on them to deal with the consequences of that legislation. We're calling on Congress to roll back the cuts that were made under the One Big Beautiful Bill, or at least delay them for a time to be able to give states a chance to figure out how it is we're going to address this. And that has to be the number one focus. Many of the other federal policy priorities that that we work on, or that we are engaged in partnership with other organizations, are important, like the annual appropriations process, making sure grants get funded, making sure financial aid gets funded. But it oftentimes, for I think understandable reasons, feels like it's just scratching at the surface of student needs. That we're never going to truly be able to marginally increase the Pell Grant each year in order to meet the full scale of need. There are so many students who can't even access Pell. Or if we simply increase funding for grant programs here and there, doesn't mean that it's not important, and they are very critical investments. But we've got to rethink our entire federal policy approach. And part of the reason I think policymakers in DC in particular aren't necessarily thinking about the need to invest in students is they do have a misconception about who students are, and they engage in really unfortunate deservingness politics around thinking that students have family support or have alternatives to meet their basic needs that they don't need to invest in. So Jamie, you talked about the who today's students are at the beginning of this, and I think it's something we commonly know as student advocates, as people who do this work in the basic needs approach. And of course, it's been a line of conversation in higher education for a decade plus now about who today's students are, but policymakers still don't know. And I see it time and time again. I was just in DC last week, students meeting with policymakers, with their staff, with them, and sort of educating them on who today's students are. That is why this Today's Students Coalition exists. It is why we're doing this work, is because policymakers still don't know. So we got to get the word out and to change these misconceptions so that then leads to a sea change in policy.
Awesome. Thank you, Bryce. And now, Jyanne talked a little bit about on the ground practice and her experience as a student working in the food pantry. But Maritza, as a practitioner who essentially is in charge of this programming, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what are some of the challenges that you're seeing on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And to give a little bit of context, we kind of oversee the food pantry. We're partner with other institutions to do the grocery shuttle. We also oversee our meal voucher program, which provides campus dining credits to financially eligible students, financial wellness programming, and then student resource support. One of the biggest challenges that kind of we see, at least on our campus, is a lot of, like I mentioned before, a lot of our programs and services are very siloed. And so that makes it really difficult to, for example, if you have a student that comes in that needs to see housing, there's a lot of touch points that need to happen before they get connected to the right person. And so I think working together to streamline those workflows is one of the things that has been helping to address that challenge. I think too, finding ways to institutionalize basic needs into our academic infrastructure. So I think a good way and mechanism of doing that is having data, which I think will also protect, or hopefully it adds a buffer with all the federal and state level changes. If we are able to demonstrate the impact of basic needs efforts on student retention, sense of belonging, all these different important benchmarkers for student success. And so, yeah, I think it was just that siloed. I think partnerships, as I've mentioned before, help these basic needs initiatives become more sustainable and also increase our capacity and aid in that institutional drive that we're seeking. So that's something that we're working on, but I'm sure it's something that we see not only in the basic needs space, but within public health. I come from a public health background. Oftentimes, a lot of these programs are operating on their own and not talking to each other. So we just kind of see that on a more grander scale at our campus. So we're trying to take advantage of all these different pieces. And I know someone had mentioned, I think it was Jamie, that there's been a lot of attention with food insecurity, basic needs at the moment at the federal and state level with increased need. I think it also becomes, it's unfortunately that's the case, but it's also really invigorated our student body to be more involved and has put the spotlight on our admin and institution to pay attention. And so we're trying to be very strategic about, what pieces we move together to help, take advantage of that spotlight to advocate for some more change, both at the policy level and then more on on the ground. So getting more funding, increasing our capacity, our staffing, and things like that. So that's kind of the main challenges I would see, just siloed operations, and then just the increased need that we're seeing not only on our campus but across the nation.
Yeah, thank you. Paige, is there anything that some of the panelists shared that you'd like to either double down on or just like additional thoughts on some of the challenges?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the way that Jamie framed what happens after students ask for help really resonates with me. I think the biggest issues that we see comes after that as well, and that's the fragmentation that students experience when they're trying to access resources. So if you're thinking about the process that students go through when they're trying to access SNAP or Medicaid or the Students Emergency Aid Fund or like the campus food pantry, they're probably going to a faculty member they really trust or maybe their academic advisor. And those people might not know or might not have access to the information needed to share with those students. So then they're passed around to one, two, three different offices before they finally get the resources they need. But that fragmentation doesn't stop there at that like individual level. It's also between campus departments. So let's say the campus food pantry wants to proactively reach out to students who might be eligible. They don't actually have access to the data that the financial aid office has that might tell them, which students might be in need of this. And so that has impacts not only on like the individual, on the frustration levels of campus staff, but also like the actual impact in, how students are receiving these benefits. So it has like a multi-level impact on that as well. I was just taking a look at that at the chat thing. Um, but yeah, so I think fragmentation is definitely the biggest issue that we see. And this also goes into the systems level as well. So like that coordination between campuses and state systems, where they both have data that they could use to proactively connect students to resources and help them have a really strong start right when they step foot on campus, instead of waiting until there's a need there.
Yeah, thank you all. Our very next question, we actually got an audience question. They're asking if anybody has eligibility requirements to utilize these resources. But just for context, whoever asked the question, we ask that you please just state like what organization you're with and if there are references either to like SNAP or other federal programs that you were referencing in your question. And once we have that information, we can tackle this question. But in the meantime, we'll go back to our scheduled questions. And our next question, you all kind of talked about like the challenges that you're facing on the ground in the policymaking process. But where do you see the most opportunity for growth in these areas? And Paige, if you would like to kick us off, feel free to do so.
For sure. I'm going to keep doubling down on this issue that I was talking about of fragmentation. So I think the biggest opportunity for growth is really strong alignment. So like alignment between students' needs, between college systems, and between state systems, federal policy. All these things really need to work together to ensure a seamless experience for students as they're trying to access these resources. Higher education systems and state systems are already collecting financial data from students. The state agencies are administering SNAP and Medicaid that rely on some of this data. And so the really big opportunity here is to intentionally connect those systems so that students are identified and supported proactively instead of waiting for them to have to reach out for help. I think there's also a huge opportunity in elevating authentic student leadership within that alignment. So we see a lot of times, there are advisory councils for students or, things like this that might incorporate their impact, but aren't actually like integrating it into that like system change aspect. So thinking about how we can actually train, compensate, and integrate student leadership into the institutional strategy. This will help all of our basic needs efforts become more trusted and also more responsive to the real barriers that students are facing.
I can jump in if you'd like, Christiane. I'd say something that gives me a lot of hope is seeing the power of growing advocacy in federal policy. And, I think we all recognize that while basic needs insecurity is not a new topic for college students who've been facing it, for many decades, and the work that we're doing is not new to try to address these needs, the growth of an actual national network and a combined coordinated effort to engage in advocacy is still fairly new, right? Our national coalitions are only, just a couple of years old. We've only started to come together to share intel, share data, share resources, and that has a lot of potential. Right now, there isn't necessarily a sustained year-long regular effort to bring students in to meet with their policymakers. Today's Students Coalition is doing that. It's wonderful, it's new, and we could all be doing more to bring students in and have folks sharing their stories directly with policymakers such that they can't avoid us, that they're hearing the drumbeat on all of the barriers from financial aid to public benefits that could be addressed by timely federal policy action. Right, and to hear it when it makes the most difference, to hear about Pell when decisions on Pell are being made, or to hear about SNAP when the Farm Bill is being constructed. And this I think is just, when I talk about it or think about an opportunity for growth, I know that we have power, and by bringing more of students and thoughtful advocates in to meet with policymakers on a more regular basis, I really do think that we have an opportunity to shift federal policy. I've seen it happen. My previous role before I came to the Hope Center about 4 years ago, I worked as a staffer on the U.S. Senate Help Committee for about 7+ years. And I absolutely know that the power of direct advocacy shifts the conversations that members of Congress are having, the kinds of requests that they run up the chain to their leadership, the types of priorities they put in for the annual appropriations process. Real concrete steps happen as a result of folks meeting with their policymakers. And so I'm really looking to that as I think is a tremendous growth opportunity for us as a national coalition, as groups who and advocates who care deeply about this work.
Yeah, and I'd love to jump in if possible. I think that was an amazing response, and I agree. I think collaboration across institutions as well as like on the federal level, state level, and I think visibility, right? Like visibility regarding these issues. And I think like thinking from like a university perspective, I'm even thinking about ways that we can get creative, right? When we're looking at opportunities for growth, we have to think, okay, where can we get creative with this? And then like I literally wrote it down when there was a question that was posed of like, who are today's learners, right? Like thinking about my university, like, can we do a video campaign? Like, I'm this type of learner, right? Like, how do we create and use our resources to make these issues regarding basic needs for students more visible? Because again, like Bryce mentioned, like it's literally about that visibility and how we are going to reach them because we are powerful, right? But it's about, kind of being like that annoying little sibling, like it's in your face, it's in your face, like you cannot ignore it, right? And so I think some opportunities for growth, especially on the university level, like again, those partnerships and those collaborations, but just getting creative, right? Like I think my university, we're heading towards campaign season like in the next month. And so especially I'm about to be a senior at my university next year, like I'm looking for those that are running that have creative ways of thinking about, okay, how are we going to amplify these issues? Like how are we going to like A&T, we're a campus where we are very involved in like civic engagement, things like that. Like they took our early polling site away. We went to the Board of Elections, not only within our county, but at the state capitol. I know that there's advocacy days. I actually know Swipe Out Hunger like has advocacy days. And so like, but that's what we just have to think about. We have to think about how to be creative. And again, just like we want these people to meet, like the people who are working in policy to meet us where we're at, we kind of have to meet them where they're at as well. And just think about ways in which we can be creative to get our point across. So thank you for that, Bryce. I think that was great.
Georgia's catching up to North Carolina. Be careful now. They're getting involved. They're getting it did. I went full unicorn mode on this question. Like, we've got some really strong strategies that we've been using for the last few years, but like, what if we just had like universal food access for students or like a living wage? Like, what if students didn't need to tell their story and be traumatized again and again and again? What if we had, to Paige's point, coordinated care, like a continuum and coordinated care point that housing's done successfully in the last decade or so? Um, I went that direction. So blame Chebna. I was there last week. They had all these pilot programs that they were testing. It was inspirational. I think that the system needs to look completely different. It's one of the things that I love about the basic needs centers that are evolving, because to Jyanne's point, like the administration is really starting to invest in this and see that it's less expensive to retain students than it is to attract new students. And it's also better for their, sorry, trigger warning, incoming red state language happening, but it's better for their economic standpoint, their impact as a higher education institution. That's my dream, right? Is that students don't have to have these programs. They don't even need to get there. But probably a more realistic approach is, again, what folks are touching about or around on this call is that state level solution. That's probably a short and midterm solution that's more possible. Bryce has already talked about the large impact that the bills passed at the federal level are having at the state level. So states are really trying to quickly reshape their resources to fit what's needed within their state. But we're seeing really cool state level collaborations come out. California's been doing this for a few years, but they have the higher education department sharing Pell eligibility with Health and Human Services, who's then providing back a list of who might on that list be eligible for SNAP so they can do more targeted outreach. There's solutions like that happening at the state level, and folks are increasingly becoming more interested in finding something like that that works for their state. So I'm excited for those opportunities. Again, state level collaboration that can patch us through to systemic change, real life altering systems work. Maritza, did I interrupt you? Were you going to say something really profound and now I distracted you?
No, I was moved. If anything, I'm just like more invigorated. No, you're so good. Yeah, I can jump in. I think there's so many areas of growth. So many. I think again, like I've mentioned so many times, you're probably tired of me hearing it, partnerships, but that is like the backbone of like a long-term sustainable institutionalized effort that goes beyond the efforts of one coordinator or one director. It goes and it ties in the student body, the staff, and the faculty. So I think, yeah, cross-sector collaboration within like higher education, so partnering better with our financial aid office as we do it right now. We're able to get a list of all the students who are Cal Grant A or Cal Grant B eligible. We automatically send an email telling them, hey, you might be eligible for CalFresh. Of course, we could take that a step further. My idealized version is like people are automatically tied in with the caseworker and get benefits, but that is a lofty goal 5 to 10 years from now. But hopefully that'll happen at some point. So an example like that, like cross like collaboration between, our institution, but also like county agency and nonprofits, basic needs operates at so many different levels of influence at the policy level, population level, doing things like workshops, trainings for staff or faculty, or even student groups, to even the individual level, like doing one-on-one support, case management. And so I think tying in some of our local partners to kind of increase our capacity. If we don't have the capacity to, help them entirely in one area, whether that's like getting benefits or accessing food, partnering with the food bank and, doing that warm handoff. So trying to bring in all different sectors to kind of help embody and to have that warm hug that just sustains outside of higher education, I think would be really great. And like I mentioned, embedding support into like our infrastructure. So making basic needs part of our orientation. Like as students come in, they are immediately aware of what the resources are. Doing social media campaigns, social marketing campaigns, partnering with different, student affinity spaces, whether it's our EOP, our trio spaces. So making sure that we're embedding it in every possible way. It's making sure that everyone's aware of it and that, as we educate, whether that's affinity group, people are more comfortable to access those resources, right? If there's a trusted resource or trusted space that they can go to. So yeah, lots of opportunities of growth, a lot of things that we can do and have been working on and will continue to work on.
Awesome. So thank you all. We see partnerships at the institutional level, the state level, the federal level are all key in the success to ensure that we can expand and maximize basic needs. But Maritza, you kind of talked about this a little bit, but what should we be doing, whether at the federal, state, or institutional level, be prioritizing in the next 3 to 5 years to better support learners' basic needs? And Maritza, if you would like to get us started, go for it.
Yeah, of course. I think I can speak, I think, best at the institutional level. I think within, Cal Poly, I think continuing to invest and treat basic needs as a core student success infrastructure. And I think a key opponent of that is like maybe expanding our capacity, whether that's bringing in paid student staff as much as we can. Having a shared data, that's something that we really, really want to work on, is prioritizing like what the usage is on campus, rates of food insecurity, and like measurable outcomes of students who have utilized basic needs resources and kind of how that's impacted their retention. Because I think that will help us, one, gain like more potential funding, and then two, like highlight the impact of the work and why, at the administrative level, why it's something worth investing in. I mean, we know it, right? Like food is a basic need, it's a right, it's a human right. But I think as Jamie was saying, like framing it in a way that is strategic and will like move the needle forward. So yeah, I think that at the institutional level is just prioritizing building out that infrastructure. And then also investing in preventative supports. So making sure that students have financial coaching, rental education, have all the things that they need ahead of time before they get to the urgent point and before they reach crisis state. So I think that's at our level something we can continue to invest in. I think ideally at the federal level, like making Cal Fresh eligibility a lot more streamlined and having it be automatically tied to like Pell or FAFSA status. I think again, long goals, but that is something that I think at the institutional level and federal level, I think would be nice to see in the next couple of years.
Are you ready for more rainbows and sunshine? Too bad, here it comes. Federal level, complete SNAP revision. Like rabbit hole, SNAP was created to provide stability for farmers. Like the access to food for households was just like kind of a nice afterthought. So like, what if we rethought SNAP? The eligibility requirements, the access, the amount, everything. Like, what if we just went from scratch? Okay. Again, I know that's going to be, to use Maritza's term, like that's far out there, right? Timeline wise. But SNAP used to be I should say, our strongest anti-hunger fighting tool, right? It provided 9 meals for every 1 meal from a pantry. So how do we get back to that or exceed that, like blow it out of the water? Again, I have to say this repeatedly. It was already difficult for college students to obtain SNAP, though. So what if we, to use Paige's point again, put students at the forefront of that and had them help us in that revision, had them guide us, lead us, tell us how it would work best for them. So SNAP could be completely reimagined. I'm not in the Farm Bill like Bryce is, so I don't want to know what's happening, but if you want to ideate, I'm here for that. State level wise, passing legislation that dedicates funding to these essentials on campus, like Hunger Free Campus bill does for food access, it's becoming increasingly more difficult. So again, the federal cuts are passing along those expenses to states, like the administration of SNAP. That overhead is the largest one I'm thinking of right now. So again, state agency cross collaboration is going to become the most successful state level tool we have right now, in my opinion. But that requires input from the higher ed campuses, right? That requires collaboration with the higher ed campuses to see what's possible and works for that campus. Which leads me to that campus, like what you all can do, what we can do as a community at the campus level. Dr. Keith Curry at Compton Community College is a great example of that. He retooled his entire higher ed budget to focus on essentials first to ensure that people can just survive to get into academia, right? Like that putting themselves into academia isn't going to make them lose their house, skip meals, whatever it may be, and therefore not be successful from the get-go. So campuses advocating for what they need, rethinking how they can use resources, to Maritza's point, like collaboration with off-campus partners, Again, plug for our website if you'd like to see some national and state level data around college hunger that can help you form that messaging and help you form your plan of action. It's swipehunger.org. We have a campus leader survey where you can look and kind of query around there. If you're a campus, fill out the campus leader survey so that we can have really robust information. But I have to give some honorable mentions outside because I never follow rules. And Christian does a really great job of like prepping us and he gives us questions. And I'm like, but what else is possible? Honorable mentions. There's CBOs on this call. There's community benefit organizations here today. Can you collaborate? Can you elevate this issue? Can you partner? Can you think through creatively how we might be able to work well together and amplify student stories? And of course, Bryce already said this, there's collaborations like TSC, National Coalition for College Student Essential Needs, where we can partner together to build that messaging. We have research and knowledge sharing committees, we have student engagement committees, we have policy and advocacy committee, we have a narrative change committee. So there's a place for everybody to get involved in and outside of what we're doing in our current roles. Thanks for letting me go off script, Christian.
I can jump in with sort of a policy focus. I don't know if this is yours thing, because it might be a little bit more near term. But I mentioned, the potential cuts, or the pending cuts rather, from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. I think we have to take stock as a movement that bill, that new law that passed last July, it imposes over $1 trillion in cuts to our social safety net that will break most states. And here in Washington State, where I'm at, they're already starting to grapple with this to understand what the impact is going to be. So in addition to reversing the cuts of OBA or HR1 or OB3, whatever you want to call it, we also need to say, and when you do reverse those cuts, we need to rethink SNAP, like Jamie said. It can't be just enough to go back to the way things were. We know that it wasn't sufficient alone. We need a sort of a more visionary rethinking of our SNAP and our Medicaid program. I am worried that what we might end up with, because of dynamics in Congress, unless we push hard and in a coordinated fashion, is that just some of the cuts get rolled back and we assume it all works out. That policymakers don't take the threat of that legislation seriously and make a concerted effort. This is obviously an election year, and being strictly nonpartisan in my analysis, there could be a change in control of Congress this year. Whether or not that brings about a change in policy priorities, whether or not a new Congress tries to potentially change what was done last year and has to negotiate with the administration to change that policy, is going to be a topic of conversation that's really probably very robust and very lively over the next year. And we as advocates for student basic needs can weigh in there to say what we really want to happen is a full reversal and a rethinking of our SNAP and our Medicaid programs in particular. And I say those two in particular because they have the most outsized impact on student basic needs funding. SNAP and Medicaid are only two benefits that our students use and utilize, right? They're very key. They're probably two of the most important, but the real impact is on states' ability to fund higher education and public support. And if they have to make up $1 trillion in cuts, there simply won't be room left for higher education to exist as we know it. There won't be available funding to support our community colleges, our state four-year institutions, our state-based financial aid programs. All of that will be decimated. And so I hate to be the doom and gloom guy, but I'm looking forward to partnering with everybody to really push back on these incredibly damaging policies. And I think I think that has to be our goal number one on a policy front.
Yeah, I can hop in really quickly because I have to go in just a few minutes, but I just wanted to share that I think this call is a great start to see, where we can be moving forward. And I just appreciate everybody who's listening in, everybody who's serving as a panelist, and like all of the support from TSC and everyone for even amplifying this conversation. I think as a student volunteer and worker at my school's food pantry, I definitely think that on the institutional level, we can help these food pantries. I think the biggest, to give you guys some insight on like what we're currently facing as a food pantry, is just like we're growing. And I'll be honest, like our food pantry is in our old student health center and we only have access to like a little bit of that space. And so as we're growing, I just think we're finding it hard to kind of keep up with the demands of like the students who utilize the space and things like that. And grants are so helpful. Donations are very helpful, right? But I think that greater like institutional support, right? And just, even those who are at the state and federal level, just even coming to visit the space and seeing what students, face on a daily basis can just help for like better support, right? It might not even look like we need like monetary funding. It might just look like, hey, how about you bring some people to our event that we're having on campus, right? And so that's the biggest way in which I could see that how we could go forward in terms of support. And yeah, I want to just thank everybody for joining the call today, and I look forward to, amplifying this work further.
Awesome. I would just like to once again give a huge thank you to all of our wonderful panelists for sharing their insights. I hope that what we learned today continues to impact our work to ensure the success of every learner. TSC is super excited to share some of the work that we've been taking on recently. As we continue our Basic Needs Advocacy Month, we encourage you to continue engaging with our work. Please head over to our website at todaysstudents.org to check out our recent brief highlighting promising practices for parenting students found on the Our Impact tab in our resources. We will also soon be releasing 2 more briefs highlighting the state policy landscape for basic needs and some findings from a focus group we recently conducted with parenting students. Additionally, we have open registrations open still for our DC Student Summit happening in Washington, DC from March 23rd to the 25th. And this will be an opportunity for students to share their stories with policymakers and engage in conversations with dozens of congressional offices and government representatives. Finally, we will be following up with you after this webinar to share a recording and a survey. And we ask that you please complete the survey to help us continue to improve the webinar experience. You can find us on all social medias at TSC National, and please visit our website to learn more about our work and join our mailing list. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me directly via email at creyes@todaysstudents.org. Once again, thank you all, and we look forward to continuing our work collectively with intention and impact.